Welcome to the Fully Mindful, where we explore what it means to live with intention, creativity, authenticity, and connection. I'm your host, Melissa Chareau, mindfulness and breathwork facilitator, neurodivergent lawyer and coach, and fellow human navigating this wild and beautiful ride we call life. On this podcast, we dive deep with interviews featuring inspiring guests, share solo mini episodes packed with guided mindfulness practices to help you center and thrive, and mix things up with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and fellow podcaster Debbie Harrell from the New World Normal joins me for some real, random, and meaningful conversations. So if you're ready to pause, reflect, and expand, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful.
So just giving yourself permission to, have a stepwise journey and make mistakes and not do it perfect, but just do it, I think is something that if we could do that in every aspect of our lives, we'd all be a lot happier. That's part of what I really like about it. It has enabled me to get up in front of a lot of people who probably are strangers and share something really intimate and be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty magical experience, especially, when if you have all these fears about if I said this to people I know and love, what would they think of me? I'm not sure that I still know my purpose, but I wonder if maybe it's enough of a purpose to find joy. I don't necessarily mean pleasure by that, but what is it that brings you joy? And maybe going after that is enough of a purpose for anybody.
What could be funnier than being a government lawyer? Seriously. Add to that being a parent of 2 awesome kids, a wife, and being in the land of Portlandia, and you get the picture. Enter my conversation with Heather Weigler, who after years of being a government lawyer and wanting and needing a space where she could step out on her own, stepped out onto the comedy stage. Our conversation explores the mindfulness, yes, the mindfulness of being a comedian and a lawyer, how vulnerability is a superpower, how parenting is hard, and how important it is to find yourself both in and outside of parenting. And we talk about the path to finding purpose. Join me on this interesting and fun journey with Heather Weigler, lawyer, mom, wife, comedian. Hey everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful, and I'm super excited to be here today with Heather Weigler. And she is a government lawyer by day and a comedian by night, and also a pretty awesome mom and wife and family member, and otherwise all around cool person and friend. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Yeah, very excited. And so little intrigue there. If we'll just kind of get people interested and understanding who you are, how is it that you're a government lawyer? Like, what do you do?
Well, I work at the Oregon Department of Justice in what's called the charitable activities section, where we regulate charities and their fundraisers. It's a great job, not only because I just like the people I work with and enjoy the fact that I'm part-time, but also because I get to wear the white hat and help ensure that charities' assets are used for the purposes they're intended and not to privately benefit fundraisers or other bad actors.
That's so awesome. And just for the listeners, nobody from DOJ is probably listening to this. So she is not being paid by DOJ to say awesome things about the job that she does. She genuinely means that. And I've had the pleasure of working in his office, although not in the same section as Heather. And so while those of you who aren't lawyers may not realize like what an incredibly cool and important job it is, I can tell you it's an incredibly cool and important job. Because let's face it, there are probably some quote unquote charitable organizations out there that aren't quite doing it right, and sometimes on purpose.
That is absolutely correct. And it's probably a lot more than your listeners would like to know. But we don't just deal with people who are outright stealing money. We also can help guide charities towards the right solutions with their board conflicts or other issues that might help them serve the public better.
Which I think is the cool part too. Like you're part of the solution in so many ways, not just catching the bad actors, but actually helping those who are trying to do good,
Right.
which is super cool. And people are probably like, okay, but didn't you also say that she's a comedian? And so tell us about that. Like, what's that about?
Well, I'd been working at the department for, I don't know, several years, and I had had my first baby. And when I went back to work after maternity leave, I was having a hard time not only just balancing everything, but finding myself, because motherhood, for all its virtues, is also a time in your life where you're hyper focused on somebody else. And
Yeah.
so it's very easy to kind of lose your mooring and forget yourself in that process. And it's really similar to lawyering in that way, because of course, as a lawyer, you're an advocate for somebody else's interests, not your own. So those two pursuits are very externally focused on other people. And I was really feeling that. And I was trying all sorts of different things to figure out what would help me find that spark of self again. I went skydiving. I, would say yes to anything that came across my path. And one of those things was being a lawyer comedian in the Campaign for Equal Justice, which is an organization that raises funds for legal aid services in our state. Hosts a lawyer comedy competition where the lawyers get up, and of course you judge who's the funniest, or a panel of actual judges choose who's the funniest. But there's also competition around how much money you can raise for a good cause. And I knew I would be really good at that. So I said yes. And the day of the comedy competition, I spent absolutely bawling and regretting every choice I had made that led me up to this point of potentially performing in front of like 200 of my peers. And then I did it, and it was amazing. And I loved it so much that I ended up taking classes and going to open mics. And so I've been to a comedy festival. That was right before the pandemic began, so I haven't really got back out there in the same way. But I've kept my toe in the comedy waters. I've competed in an annual competition that Helium Comedy Clubs puts on in Portland for Portland's funniest person. And I've never advanced. And for me, that's not the point of it at all. It's just to have that, 4 to 6 moments on stage where everybody has to listen to you. And that feels really good in a way that I don't know how to describe it really, but it's quite the opposite of being focused on other people, because all attention is on you in that moment. And you also have to do some self reflection and soul searching to decide what persona I'm going to put out there to people. So it's really more about you than other people. And that's kind of what brought me to comedy.
Yeah, I think that's so awesome. And I just kind of want to go back to that first Campaign for Equal Justice event. And have you done more than one of those, or just one?
I did, I think 3 different ones now. It's an every other year thing, and they haven't held it, of course, since the pandemic. But each time it was really a wonderful experience and so much fun.
And I think, I mean, you described it. It's like at least 200 of your peers, meaning lawyers you actually work with, which, by the way, lawyers aren't necessarily known for being super nice all the time. They are paid to be judgmental and to find flaws. And so you kind of knew that going into this. And these are literally your own peers as well as people from all over the state. And when you talk about judges, like you literally mean judges, like elected
Right.
judges who are judging you. And so you talked about that first time of like bawling all day and kind of questioning yourself. Was that what was going through your mind, like when you were getting ready to get on stage?
Yeah, I think it was the vulnerability of really putting yourself out there in a different way,
Mm,
because I experience being a lawyer as something that you can do right. There's somewhat of a right way to do it. You can, prepare appropriately and know all of the different arguments that are in play and be familiar with the facts of your case. And I enjoyed that. I enjoy that being a lawyer, knowing what I'm supposed to do. But I didn't have that with respect to comedy at that point. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and I didn't know how it would be received. And I was quite nervous about it. But one of the great things I think that comedy has taught me is that, first of all, people react well to vulnerability. People want to know the real you. They don't want you to pretend that everything's okay when it's not. Everybody aches for that sort of emotional connection. And stand-up comedy is somewhere that really shows up. You, even with the comedians who are really aggressive and mean towards their audience, or dark and twisted, they still are connecting emotionally with everybody in that room in a particular way that allows them to be heard and allows part of their self to be shared with the audience. So that's one thing that I've learned that I didn't realize on that day about comedy. People want you to succeed when you're on stage. They're not really looking for you to fail.
Yeah, you don't really get like, you always see these, shows or movies about how there's always like some heckler in the audience who, definitely wants the comedian to fail. But what you're saying is that's generally not the case. Like, people want you to succeed. They're looking to laugh. They're looking to connect with you. I mean, that's why they're there, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that I didn't choose to speak about any lawyering issues because that is a little fraught. I didn't want anybody to feel criticized, and I feel like probably a lot of your viewers, I don't love lawyers as a class of people. Like, there are particular lawyers who I'm very fond of course, and some of my best friends are lawyers.
Right.
But it's a profession that does drive you towards some really toxic behaviors. And so and of course it has a high standard of ethics and professionalism, and I didn't want to step outside of any bounds that lawyers have to observe. So what I talked about was parenting, and that's a pretty universal experience. Of course, not everyone has parents, or everyone does have parents, actually. Not everyone has kids, but we all know kids, and people have that experience that they could share. So I think that was really successful material that helped me connect with people. And it's what I still talk about now. It's an outlet for all the frustrations of parenting. And one of the ways that's helped me manage some of the, emotions that come up when you're parenting somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, it is a totally universal topic because, like you said, everybody, if they don't have kids, they certainly know kids. They've been kids, so they know what obnoxious little tots they've been themselves, and what their poor parents had to go through. And I love that you were looking for an outlet that would allow you to have an expression of self that was different, and it was all about you and not focused on your children or a client or something like that. And then, but it's like this perfect irony that you end up talking about being a parent, but it's great because you get to sort of vent a little bit and talk about it and connect with other people about the frustrations of being a parent, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's evolved to the point where I sort of think of it as a character, actually, because, in a stand-up comedy context, you could never really describe the full range of the parenting experience. So it's much easier to focus on moments of conflict or struggle because that's what's funny. So I've sort of evolved that piece of my comedy to talk about the regrets of motherhood and how, and sometimes I wish I weren't a parent. And I know that's a really radical thing for moms to say. Moms are not supposed to say that, but I think it's true. And if you're not at some point wondering, did I make a mistake here having these children? Then are you really even parenting them? Because no other experience has forced me to look at all of my shadow stuff or, background trauma the way that parenting has. So if you don't make space there for acknowledging how difficult it is and how it pushes everybody outside of their comfort zone, and you can either choose to collapse or grow, then I think you're doing a disservice to all the people who aren't parents and are contemplating it. We have this narrative in our culture around parenting that it's going to be this uber fulfilling experience that's going to make you feel complete and now your life will have purpose. And that's frankly a lie.
Mm.
Yes, it can be an avenue towards that, but there are no guarantees of what anyone's particular parenting experience is going to be, what your kids are going to be like, what different life struggles that you'll encounter along the way. And so one thing I think our culture could benefit from is more honesty around that, and particularly motherhood. And so that's the way at least I rationalize talking badly about my kids in stand-up comedy, I guess.
And how does your husband feel about it? Does he like your and support your comedy and the topic matter of your comedy?
He does, and I've of course had some jokes about him too and marriage, and I think it's difficult to be the family member of somebody who is publicly joking about you. Like, I don't necessarily want my kids to see see my YouTube channel because there are jokes on there that they might find hurtful if they're not coming from the space of this is a character. And although my husband, of course, is an adult, I think that's hard too. He's supportive and he doesn't ever ask me not to tell any, but sometimes I can tell that it's not his favorite topic if I'm joking about our marriage, and I can certainly respect that. So it's something I try to be very careful about.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. It's the new year, and I bet you're feeling the need to unlock your full potential and embrace empowerment, or maybe something completely different. Well, I'm excited to offer a new program with one-on-one breathwork and coaching sessions. We'll embark on a truly transformative journey of self-discovery, combining conscious, connected breathwork and embodiment coaching, and more. So contact me, Melissa, at The Fully Mindful, for your transformative session today. Yeah, and I mean, that's interesting. You talk about it as like a character or a persona, but it is, in fact, like a facet of you. I mean, it's not like this made up
Absolutely.
person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that fascinating because, I mean, I've seen your comedy and, I personally think you're freaking hilarious and love it. But it is sometimes the jokes have been, oh, I could see like why, your husband or your children would get a little uncomfortable. At the same time, if they're good sports, like they could probably see like, oh yeah, mom's right. But yeah, it really is the real you. It's not like some persona that you've made up, right?
Or no, that's absolutely true. It's I think everybody is made up of lots of various parts of ourself.
Mhm.
So it's absolutely a part or parts of me. And comedy gives me the freedom to say, I'm just going to occupy this part. I'm not going to have to explain it or, soften the blow of it or make it seem palatable. I'm just going to be this one particular part, which is cranky about being a parent.
Right.
And that's a wonderful release valve because
Yeah.
everybody who's a parent has that. It's a hard job. It is the hardest job any of us will ever do, and it has the biggest stakes.
Yeah.
And all that put together creates tremendous pressure. And so finding ways to relieve that pressure is really important. And this is one of the ways I found.
Yeah, and I think what I find fascinating too, I know I'm going back to that first time that you got on stage and you were nervous, and maybe and it sounds like you've worked through that and you were able to get on stage and you've since performed many times. And it's this, I think the part that I find fascinating is this integration. And what I mean is, you're a mom, you're a wife, and you're a lawyer, and those are really different roles in so many ways, right? And like who we are as lawyers can potentially be really different than who we are as parents or as spouses or as friends, right?
Mhm.
And I know that the first time I think I was giving like a mindfulness talk to lawyers, I got really freaked out because I thought, oh my God, they're going to see, the quote unquote real me. It's not like the lawyer's not the real me. It's just a different part of me that they haven't seen. And now they're going to see this other part of me and like, oh my God, what are they going to think of me? And oh my God, is this okay? And like my worlds are colliding. And, and I don't know if you had that experience too.
No, I absolutely did. I think that's where a lot of the fear was coming from, because lawyers really, we cultivate this particular persona like you're talking about. That's part of ourselves, and who we are as lawyers is very different often than who we are as people. And I have found sort of a way through that. I just I stopped caring as much about what people thought. And comedy was certainly forces you to do that, because if you get out there enough and you're working on your material enough and your craft, then you're going to fail. You're going to have times where you say something and there's just dead silence in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment is really hard, but it's also quite a gift, because once you realize that you can survive that moment, everything becomes possible. The other thing that's really wonderful about comedy that's very different from parenting and lawyering are that the stakes are so incredibly low. Every show is a new opportunity to try again and do better. So that's a very freeing part of it as well.
Yeah, and even every moment in a show. I mean, I've certainly seen plenty of comedians where, a joke does not land, right? It's like you said, it's crickets, nothing happens. And, depending on how they're able to recover from that, they do it. And then everybody's laughing again and they forgot about the fact that they bombed the last joke, and nobody
Absolutely.
cares. And they're so forgiving. Like you said, they want to connect. And I love that. It's very like, to me, akin, I know this is weird to make this analogy here, or comparison, but it's akin to mindfulness, right? Like I can be meditating, let's say, or trying to be mindful, and my mind wanders as it will. Like I'm human, and I tell people this, like people are like, yeah, but I can't stop my thoughts. And I'm like, you can't, because you're not dead. So like if you were dead, then you'd have no thoughts. Maybe. I mean, I'm guessing. I don't actually know, of course. So, but I mean, that's the point. And so like, that's not a failure. It's just something that happened. And then the exercise is coming back to the present moment, right? And
Yeah, I think that's
noticing
a
that.
great analogy, actually. It's a really perfect analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's awesome. That's what I think is so cool about comedy is you're really in the present moment and, absolutely connecting with other people and with yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have this opportunity. So that is super cool. Yeah, I know when I was thinking about sometimes I'm really fortunate in the DOJ. I'm part of our health and wellness committee, and I get to put on these, I call them 10-minute Tuesdays, right? And so I do these like 10-minute guided meditations on Zoom or whatever we use. And again, like the first time I did that one, I was really nervous because I always give like a couple minute talk, and it's usually something vulnerable. And I got really nervous about my colleagues, knowing these kind of more personal details about how I think or what I'm feeling. But at the same time, like you said, it was very freeing. It was very much like, I guess this is just who I am, and this is how I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
And I've also never had anyone be like, oh my gosh, that Melissa, she just shared something, and maybe they say that on the side, I don't know, but the same people keep coming back. So I don't think so.
I doubt it. But if they are talking behind your back, well, they're behind you, right? So
Right. 100%. And I mean, and I'm sure you've had that experience too of just like you said, you've learned, and maybe this is part of the practice of comedy and also the part of practice of mindfulness of just ceasing to care and how freeing that is to not care so much. I mean, yes, of course there are going to be moments, but to mostly not care, right?
Right. I mean, that's part of what I really like about it. It has enabled me to get up in front of a lot of people who probably are strangers and share something really intimate and be accepted.
Hmm.
That's a pretty
Yes.
magical experience, especially, when if you have all these fears about, if I said this to people I know and love, what would they think of me? Especially, if you're talking about how annoying you find it to be a parent. You wouldn't want your kids to hear that. I'd
Sure.
probably, worry about what my parents might think or whatever. But in the comedy context, you can just say it and people accept it and enjoy it. And so that's a really rewarding moment.
It is. I mean, I think there's a reason why, you know, when we take airplanes and we sit next to a stranger, like sometimes you can have like the coolest conversations with these people because you're never going to see them again. Or perhaps Uber drivers or Lyft drivers have this experience where, they get to have this amazing conversation. I've certainly had some really interesting conversations with Uber drivers, sometimes a little too interesting, really, but you know and it's like, but it's great. It's like, okay, done, never going to see them again, but I got to connect with this other human being in this maybe potentially really vulnerable way, and everybody was fine with it.
Right. That's
Yeah.
really something I really like about it. And I've also found that when you get up and do your set afterwards, if you feel like it went really well, it went okay. If you feel like it went really horrible, it went okay. Like how you feel about it isn't necessarily how the audience feels about it. And so
Mm.
that's always helpful to keep in mind, that it's really not productive to beat up on yourself about your mistakes in stand-up comedy, but that's a lesson that translates all across life.
So, I mean, do you ever watch like a video recording of yourself after the fact?
I do. I have a YouTube channel, so I have some that I've actually, produced to the public, and I audio record every time I perform
Hmm.
so that you can go back and listen to it, because there are always things to learn from that process. That being said, I am not the best at making myself do it because it can be very painful
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
sit there and listen to yourself and think, oh, I wish I had said that, or oh, I didn't realize I messed up that word, which will inevitably happen. So you kind of have to take a scientific approach to it and say, I'm going to evaluate this as if I were listening to somebody else, to see what you can glean from it without the self-judgment. At least that's what I try to do. Because again, that self-judgment is just not going to help you do better next time. What's going to help you do better next time is looking at it more objectively about what
Mm-hmm.
could have gone better, what went wrong, and what are the ways in which I can set myself up for success in the future.
Yeah, we so often don't do that in our regular lives. I do remember when I was first starting out as a lawyer, I had a supervisor. I was working in the district attorney's office, and it was called Misdemeanor Row. It was just a row of just like god awful offices. I mean, like literally the wallpaper was like sticky. What? I don't know, but it was. And so, but I had this great boss, and we'd have trials like almost every day. And, we were really new and green at this. And he would always want to debrief. And it was exactly that. It was like, sit down. What do you think went well? Why do you think it went well? What was it that went well? What didn't go so well? What do you wish you had done? And it was such an incredible learning experience that, I don't think a lot of professions do. I mean, many do, but not all of them. And then even after a certain level of success, maybe we stop doing it, and we shouldn't, right? Like it's really valuable, like you said, to have that self-reflection in a very objective way, in a non-judgmental way, and to really look at it, like you said, as if it were another person doing it.
Right.
And what I find interesting is and in fact, when we do watch other people, I don't know if you've had this experience, but certainly when I've watched other lawyers, rarely, if ever, am I judgmental about them, unless they do something like ethically wrong, which is really, 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 really rare. But, I'm not judgmental, but I could be of myself. And so being able to exercise that sort of level of objectivity is really an amazing skill, and also a very, I'm going to again analogize it to mindfulness. Because when I'm practicing mindfulness, let's say I'm meditating, I could, like, if I notice a thought, I could be like, well, that was a thought. Man, that's so screwed up. Why am I still having those thoughts? Why do I keep thinking? Why can't I have a quiet mind? Blah, blah, blah. Like, that could happen and has, but it doesn't serve me, right?
Right.
But just being able to notice, oh, that was a thought. And then even if I have the judgmental thought, to say, oh, that was a judgmental thought, right? And it's sort of the same thing. And that can just, it really can take you so much further along in the process. And I feel like what you're saying is the same thing. Like, you're able to look at your videos or listen to your audio and find what worked and what didn't work, not for some sort of exercise in self-flagellation, but like to improve your craft, right? To
Right.
create.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I have the same experience with meditation of not getting better at it until I let go of self-talk about how bad I was at it. And I mean, everyone struggles with it, I think,
I think
because thoughts are just part of what, like you said, being alive is. But letting go of that, the need to do it right in pursuit of doing it better, I think has made all the difference. And it's an attitude actually that's helped me in another area of my life, which is exercising.
hmm,
Because before the pandemic, I felt like I had to do a certain amount of exercise every day and work out really hard. I was at like Orange Theory Fitness, which is a kind of intense program, and I would just be exhausting myself and not be able to show up sometimes to do it. And then the pandemic hit, and I kind of got out of shape even more. And I decided, well, I'm just going to do little bits, like 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. And that really was the key to unlocking me getting back into shape again, just
hmm.
being able to wrap my mind around doing those little bits. So just giving yourself permission to, have a stepwise journey and make mistakes and not do it perfect, but just do it.
Right.
I think is something that if we could do that in every aspect of our lives, we'd all be a lot happier.
100%. It's funny. I actually did an Orange Theory class this morning, and I was like cursing that I had signed up for this thing, because it was like, I'm new to it, but it's a benchmark day. Maybe you remember what those are.
I do.
And it was Mount Everest, which sounds as awful as, as it was. But even in those situations, there's that opportunity to just give yourself permission. So for this Mount Everest thing, it was like when you're on the treadmill, whenever the coach tells you, you increase your incline by 20% or 2% or whatever it is, till you get to this top peak. And then you continue at these high intervals, but you slowly go down the ladder. And I had that moment that you're talking about of like, oh, I got to do this, and I have to keep running. And I was like, no, I don't. I can just walk.
Right.
And it was great. It was like, it was still valid. It was still great. And it was so freeing to just give myself that permission to do what felt comfortable in that moment for me. And so I love that, bit of observation and advice. And I think that's really cool that you do that.
Yeah. I think that there's or at least I grew up with such this idea that there was a particular form of success, which was getting a good education, being able to support yourself with some sort of professional job, hopefully one that you could sit at a desk for, that because all of my family would have jobs that required them to stand and work with their bodies.
Hmm.
And so that was so identified as the pinnacle of success for me. It's taken me some time to kind of question that and undo it and think about, there's no particular way to do things right. That was ill-informed belief I had as a kid. So what does it mean to succeed now? And I think it means just doing what you can, doing what you can to improve your comedy, your lawyering, your parenting, your mindfulness, your humanness.
I love that. And I mean, we talk a lot on this podcast about, finding your purpose. And the thing that I've learned in this journey of podcasting is I'm sure somebody's out there, but I have yet met somebody who was like, when I was 5, I knew what my purpose in life was going to be. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you that person? Did you know what your purpose was in life when you were 5? Okay,
no,
good.
I don't think so. I'm not sure that I still know my purpose, but I wonder if maybe it's enough of a purpose to find joy. I don't necessarily mean pleasure by that, but what is it that brings you joy? And maybe going after that is enough of a purpose for anybody. So I'm still working out exactly what that looks like for me, but I think I'm getting closer. I work part-time because I like being a person more than I like being a lawyer, even though I love my job. But I definitely want room in my life for other things. So my purpose is not to be the best lawyer in Portland or the attorney general or have a fancy title or a big salary. That I know. So beyond that, I'm still looking for what other purposes might come along during the rest of my life.
Yeah, and it seems to me anyway that, you have also found it in being a pretty kick-ass parent and comedian and wife and friend and, family member. Like we have these, there's not just this one purpose in life. And I think in this country, especially, and maybe others too, but I know for sure in this country, we're sort of fed this narrative that, there will be one thing that we are meant to do, and whatever that is. And I don't know that that's true. I don't know that it's one thing. Maybe it's many, many things.
I like that. I think it is many things.
Yeah.
And maybe tied together by the common thread of what is it that gives you joy and makes you feel the most you.
Ooh, I like that. I'm writing that down, to find joy and the thing that makes you feel the most you. Love it. Freaking love that. So I have just like some silly questions, I guess, to sort of start winding this up a little bit. Do you have a favorite comedian? Or who are some of your favorites?
There are so many that I like. That's a really hard question. So
Right?
I'm gonna have to say that I really like this guy, Alex Falcone. He's not famous yet. He's Portland famous though. He is the person who I took stand-up comedy classes several years ago, and I think he has an exceptional ability, not only as a comedian, but as a teacher. So I really have a soft spot in my heart for that guy. I also really liked Ali Wong. I don't know if you've seen her specials on Netflix, but she takes a very interesting look at parenting and motherhood. There's this comedian, Sam J, who is, I think, out of New York. You can find her special, her special, I think, on Netflix.
Cool.
And yeah, so I like women comedians, obviously, because women are funnier than men.
Totally. 100%. I mean, I like many male comedians, but yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Have you watched the show Hacks on HBO?
Yes. And actually, the actress Hannah Einbender was here in Portland this weekend. I couldn't afford tickets to her show, however, unfortunately, but she is a really great stand-up comedian as well. And that's an amazing show. I'm from Las Vegas originally, so I have a soft spot in my heart for the Vegas aspect of it too. But I recommend everybody who's a stand-up comedy fan check that out, or just a fan of good half-hour shows.
I love that show, and I watched I kind of binge watched both seasons. I don't think they'll be doing another season, but I kind of cried at the end, and I was like, what's that about? So, I
Yeah,
mean,
it was emotional.
yeah, no, it really was. And the comedy in it is amazing. And I mean, for those who don't know, it really is, it's about, I guess, what people might call as an aging comedian who has been wildly successful and is in her prime in Vegas, giving basically like nightly shows and doing really well. And then there's this other comedian off writer, I guess, who kind of says like the one wrong thing, I don't know, on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. And she's sort of canceled. And so they've got the same agent. And so they end up working together, and their relationship and how those two actors are able to play that relationship, because they're so very, very, their characters are so very different, is really quite beautiful.
It
And
really is.
yeah,
And I'm happy to report it has been greenlit for another season. So
oh, that's fantastic. Because they kind of left it like, could be, maybe not, could be, maybe not. So that is, I'm glad that you've seen that. And, big plug, and HBO is not paying me, but maybe they should. That would be really nice if they did. And you too. So where, like, do you have any shows coming up?
I don't. I don't have any shows coming up, but that's not true. I am doing some stand-up comedy at a annual event for my husband's nonprofit, the Portland Urban Debate League, which runs policy debate programs at Title I schools in the Portland area. So it's a really great nonprofit that encourages debate as an activity in schools that might otherwise not have access to that activity. And he and I met because we were both on the NYU college debate team. So debate's a special part of our lives as well. And I guess he thought it would be good to spice up the program a little bit. And I'm going to do some stand-up comedy there this weekend. But other than that, I'm just looking for opportunities and kind of slowly getting back into it. I've focused a lot more on TikTok during the pandemic because, I've been trying to avoid other people, unfortunately, and comedy audiences are full of people. So
That they are.
So I have a TikTok account, which is at more of a Veronica, and I'm crawling my way up the TikTok ladder of followers. And I really just do it for fun, though. It's another little outlet where, you can have a random thought and share it with the world and see what they think.
I'm totally going to have to get with you offline about that, because I'm fascinated by what happens on TikTok. And of course, I have a teenager who, I don't know, probably spends, I don't even want to admit this, but hours on TikTok a day, maybe even. I mean, she also does other things, but, especially during summer, there's a lot of TikTok. And my husband also does a fair amount of TikTok. And I'm like, can I do like, I don't know, mindful TikTok? I have no idea if this could be a thing or what it could be, but I'm fascinated by this method of communication, and think it's really cool and kind of artsy, and like this, just, I think it's all the things that like maybe Facebook and Instagram wanted to be, but actually is.
Yeah, I love TikTok much more than any other social media that I have. And part of the reason I like it is that you can really make it whatever you want to be. There is absolutely mindfulness TikTok. Some of my favorite TikTok accounts are focused on mindfulness or a spiritual or personal growth. So I definitely think that there's a place for this sort of discussion on that app. There is a little bit of work that goes into figuring out how to make people listen to you, but I have complete confidence in your ability to figure that out.
Well, that is, you have a lot more confidence than I do. I do want to get back just for a quick second that I didn't realize this, that you are a total debate nerd. I mean, it makes sense, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who ever did debate who is not what I would call a debate nerd, meaning completely like 100% all in debate. Like Is that you? I mean, is
That
that who
was
you were?
me. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the activity I did in college. I would absolutely accept the moniker of debate nerd. It takes a special college student to spend their weekends traveling around the country debating policy topics with other people. Uh,
Yeah. What was
instead of,
your favorite debate, do you think? Do you have like a favorite that you remember or like something that stands out in your mind?
I don't even remember what the debate topic was, but the year I met my husband, it was some topic that had something to do with the environment. And I read a book by a woman named Vandana Shiva, I hope I have her name right, about ecofeminism, which was the idea. It's basically an intersectionality idea with ecology
Hmm.
and other oppressions interacting. And she examined that. And nobody else in the topic had really heard of that book or that idea. And so it was a really novel thing at the time. This was the 90s. And we had a lot of success arguing that, well, whatever plan you had developed didn't properly consider the different intersectionalities of oppression, and therefore we shouldn't do whatever plan you said. It was remarkably effective, very interesting, and I think it's kind of gratifying to see some of those topics that we were talking about in the 90s, like Judith Butler's genderqueer theory,
Yeah.
performance of gender, and ecofeminism now becoming almost accepted academic theories.
No,
So
they
that's been
were
the fun part.
very much cutting edge at the time, but like you said, now becoming more and more accepted, at least among certain circles. And, we won't talk about the other ones, I
Right.
suppose.
At least among rational folks who believe in science.
Yes, that's the caveat there. You have to be rational and actually believe in a thing called science. But yes, so I think that's awesome. I having another person come on who I will have to ask them that question. They were a total debate nerd and they're leading their children to be debate nerds. I'm going to have to ask them about what their favorite debate or memorable debate was. Are you sort of training up your kids to be interested in debate, or where are they on that spectrum?
Well, they're 9 and 11, so they're a little bit young for the competitive activity, but they're certainly good at debating topics with me.
Yeah.
And I do try to cultivate a culture in my house where if you come up with a good argument, or I say have an edict, and you say, "But mom, and here is a really good reason your edict doesn't make sense." I want to encourage that because
Mhm,
I'm a
mhm.
fallible human being. So they definitely feel free to tell me when they think whatever I say has some sort of logical flaw or problem.
Well,
And
wait until they're teenagers. So I know it's like, oh yes, I invite this, and I applaud you for that in all seriousness, but holy mother of God, they get really adept at arguing virtually everything. It does keep you on your toes. There's no question. And my daughter did, as part of her eighth grade, we used to call it social studies. It's called something else now. But anyway, she had to do a debate and she was so good. And I was so proud of her because of course, this was before Dobbs. So she was arguing Roe and Roe v. Wade. And it was really like tears to my eyes, so proud. And she did such an incredible job, and her debate partner just kicked ass, and it was so rad. And I was like, oh, I was never a debate nerd, but I was like becoming one in the moment, like for her. Like, oh god, I hope she does this. And just today she remarked to me, it was funny, she said, mom, I think I could be a lawyer. I think I'd be really good at it, except for all the people.
just be an appellate lawyer then.
I was like, yeah, most lawyers have to deal with people, but anyway. So as we wind this up, I also wanted to ask you, I don't know, do you have like a favorite song or favorite musician? These are questions that I tend to ask people, and you don't
I
have
don't,
to, but
gosh, I contain multitudes, Melissa. I have a
I
hard
know.
time. identifying my favorites. You're much better off asking me, like, what are you watching on TV right now?
Okay, how about that? You win. What are you watching on TV right now?
Well, right now, a new season of Reservation Dogs has come out on Hulu. It's a really
Okay.
great show about a group of Indigenous American youth in Oklahoma
Mm-hmm.
and following their various journeys. And it's really a fun one. I like it a lot. It's not always super happy, but of course that's part of what I like about TV stories is when they are also authentic. That's what everybody
Yeah.
likes.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite shows right now is also on Hulu called The Bear.
We
And
just finished that one. It was
oh,
fabulous. It was
so
so good. It
good.
was so good.
So good. And as somebody, my husband's in the restaurant business and I was in the restaurant business, it's so accurate. It's crazy.
I thought it was great. And I was wondering if people who haven't, worked in a restaurant or seen a kitchen, whether they would have the same experience of it as I and you and other people who have that experience do. Because it's kind of scary. Like if you don't have that background, looking at all the people yelling at each other, and
Hmm.
it feel a little bit tense and maybe off-putting, but it was so accurate to what it's actually like to be like in that environment.
Oh, 100% accurate. And also like I forgot, like I almost had like nostalgia, and my husband does too. I mean, he still runs a restaurant and has, his hospitality businesses, but he's not at that level, that sort of like on the line level. And how that was like and having somebody yell at you. And it's just you almost get nostalgic because it's just 100% authentic. People are just 100% who they are in that moment. And
Yeah.
just kind of coming back to that theme that we seem to have going through our conversation is this integration of who we really are, this connection with others, and the connection with other people and the vulnerability. I mean, I just think those are themes I want to continue to explore. I hope you explore them in your comedy. And one final question, if people are interested in kind of like exploring comedy, like what would you recommend for them?
Find an open mic
Hmm.
in your city and go tell a funny story. See what it feels like.
That's awesome. Awesome advice. And if people want to find you, you already gave your TikTok, but please give it again and then tell us where else we can find you.
TikTok is more of a Veronica. And you could also find me on Facebook as Heather Lou Weigler and Instagram as H. Lou Weigler.
And I will put those handy handles in the show notes so people can find you. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And I can't wait to hear more of your comedy, see what you do, check out your TikTok, and hopefully have you back on the show.
Thanks, Melissa. I cannot wait to give you TikTok lessons. We'll have to have lunch sometime soon.
Oh, we definitely will. Thanks again, Heather.
Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
You too. Hey, everybody. If you like this conversation, make sure to rate the show in Apple or Spotify or wherever you are listening so that others can find it and enjoy it too. And if you like the show and want to keep hearing great conversations with really interesting people about how they found their purpose, please donate to the show. Go to thefullymindful.com to donate today. Hey everybody, it's Melissa, and I'm wondering if you all can relate. Have you ever caught yourself procrastinating or maybe doubting your abilities, or maybe you have a black belt inner critic like I do or have had that wants to sabotage your every move with judgment and perfectionism expectations? It might keep you stuck, it might keep you anxious and away from your full potential. The Positive Intelligence Program, PQ, is a powerful 6-week journey designed to help you quiet those saboteurs, embrace positivity, and find flow in your life. Through daily practices and weekly focuses, we'll work together to build your mental fitness, The PQ app will guide you every step of the way and support you, and you'll be supported either by myself in a one-on-one or in a small group of like-minded individuals where you can share insights and progress. So reach out, contact me at info@thefullymindful.com to find out how we can work together one-on-one or in a small group today.